Some people get worse because the system rewards the worst part of them. Some people stay the same because staying the same is easier than changing. And some people, very rarely, actually learn. Carver is one of the people who learns. When he first appears, he is not presented as a future good police officer. He is presented as Herc's partner, and that alone tells you the kind of man he is at the start. He is loud, careless, physical, immature, and comfortable inside the regular police culture of the Western District. He thinks police work is about chasing people, knocking heads, making arrests, and coming back with numbers. He does not think about the people he is policing. He does not think about the long-term damage of bad police work. He does not even think very deeply about himself. He is just a cop doing what the department has taught him to do. That is important, because Carver's story is not about a secretly noble man finally revealing himself. At the beginning, he is not noble. He is ordinary in the worst way. He is the kind of police officer The Wire keeps showing us over and over, not some grand villain, not a genius, not a monster, just a man who has absorbed a bad culture and mistakes it for common sense. One of the first important things the audience learns about Carver is that he and Herc are basically the same kind of cop. They are a duo. They joke together, complain together, chase together, and often fail together. In Season 1, when they are placed on the Barksdale detail, they do not understand what Daniels, McNulty, Kima, Lester, and later Prez are really building. They want the easy version of police work. They want doors kicked in, bodies on the ground, and dope on the table. What this does for Ellis is simple. It establishes his starting point. He is not stupid, but he is lazy in the way a lot of institutional people are lazy. He accepts the job as it was handed to him. He has not yet been forced to ask whether the job itself is broken. What this does for the audience is even more important. At first, we mostly see Carver as a lesser Herc. He is funny sometimes, useful sometimes, but not serious. He belongs to the background noise of bad policing. We do not expect him to become one of the few cops in the show who actually improves. The first major crack in Carver's image comes with the money incident in Season 1. Herc and Carver find drug money and skim from it. It is not framed like some huge criminal conspiracy. That is what makes it worse. They do it casually, almost like this is just one of the small benefits of being police. They think they can get away with it because the people they are stealing from are criminals, and because in their minds, the badge gives them room to bend the rules. Daniels catches it. He knows money is missing, and instead of letting it slide, he makes them understand exactly what they have done. This moment matters because Daniels does not just catch them stealing. He shows them that the corruption they think is small is actually part of the same sickness that ruins police work from the inside. They cannot build a real case if the cops themselves cannot be trusted with the evidence. What this does for Ellis is expose the first real moral weakness in him. Carver is not just immature, he is corruptible. Not in a grand cinematic way, but in a normal way. He can be tempted, he can justify it, he can take something because he thinks nobody important will care. What this does for the audience is lower our trust in him. Before this, Carver could be seen as a dumb street cop. After this, we know the problem is deeper. He is not just rough around the edges. He is willing to betray the work if the situation makes it easy enough. But The Wire does not leave him there. The show makes the money incident one of the first steps in Carver being shaped by better leadership. Daniels is important to Carver because Daniels is the first superior officer who does not just teach him how to survive the department. He teaches him that the work has a moral shape. Daniels is not perfect, but he believes that a unit must stand for something. If the case is dirty, if the evidence is dirty, if the cops are dirty, then the whole thing is worthless. Carver does not fully understand that yet, but he hears it. The next major event in Carver's story is his betrayal of the detail. In Season 1, Carver becomes a source of information for the bosses above Daniels. Burrell and the command structure want to know what Daniels is doing, because Daniels' unit is becoming dangerous to the department's politics. The case is no longer just about low-level dope arrests. It is reaching money, lawyers, politicians, and uncomfortable truths. Carver gives information upward, and he is rewarded for it. He gets promoted to sergeant. This is one of the most important early Carver moments because it shows how the institution rewards the wrong behavior. Carver does not get promoted because he has become a great police officer. He gets promoted because he is useful to power. He gives the bosses what they want, so the bosses give him rank. What this does for Ellis is put shame on him, even if he does not know how to fully process it yet. He learns that advancement in the department does not always come from being good police. Sometimes it comes from being useful to people who are protecting themselves. What this does for the audience is make Carver look weak. Not evil, exactly, but weak. He chooses career over loyalty. He chooses the bosses over the detail. He becomes the kind of man the department can purchase cheaply. Daniels confronting Carver after the promotion is one of the turning points of his entire arc. Daniels knows what happened. He knows Carver was used. But the scene is not just about punishment. It is about disappointment. Daniels does not destroy Carver. He does something more painful. He makes Carver look at himself. That matters because Carver respects Daniels. He may not always act like it, but he knows Daniels is not Burrell. Daniels actually cares about the case. He cares about the unit. He cares about discipline. When Daniels looks at him with disappointment, Carver is forced to understand that the promotion did not make him bigger. It exposed how small he was willing to be. What this does for Ellis is plant one of the first real seeds of change. He cannot undo what he did. But from this point forward, the audience can see that Carver has the capacity to feel shame. In The Wire, that matters. Shame can destroy a person, but it can also be the beginning of growth. What this does for the audience is complicate him. We still do not admire him yet, but we start to understand that he is not locked into being Herc. There is something in him that can respond to correction. Season 2 does not transform Carver in a dramatic way, and that is the point. He has the rank now, but he has not grown into it. He is still mostly Herc's partner. He still behaves like a street cop who got promoted before he understood what leadership means. He has a title, but not yet the judgment to match it. That is one of the quiet truths of Carver's story. Promotion does not equal development. The department gives him stripes before he earns them internally. He becomes Sergeant Carver before he becomes the kind of man who should be one. What this does for Ellis is show the gap between position and character. He has authority, but authority alone does not make him better. The badge can change how people address him, but it cannot change what he understands. What this does for the audience is keep our expectations low. We are not yet watching a redeemed man. We are watching someone who has been given responsibility before he knows what responsibility is. Season 3 is where Carver begins to change in a more visible way, and the key figure in that change is Bunny Colvin. Colvin is one of the few commanders in The Wire who understands the street as something more than a scoreboard. He has been in the Western District long enough to know that the drug war is not being won. He knows the arrests are mostly theater. He knows the corners come back, the dealers come back, and the same people keep getting thrown through the same broken machine. Carver, at this stage, still thinks like a numbers cop. He understands pressure from above, he understands arrests, he understands the usual game. But Colvin challenges that whole way of thinking. He asks what the police are actually doing. He asks whether they know the people in their districts. He asks whether clearing a corner for one night means anything if the same corner is back the next day. This is where Carver starts to receive a different education. Daniels taught him integrity. Colvin teaches him purpose. What this does for Ellis is begin moving him from enforcement toward actual policing. He starts to see that the job is not only about catching people. It is also about knowing the neighborhood, knowing the players, knowing the damage, and understanding what the police presence does to ordinary life. What this does for the audience is create the first real distance between Carver and Herc. Herc stays mostly trapped in the old way. Carver starts listening. Amsterdam is the biggest part of that education. Colvin creates unofficial free zones where drug dealers can sell away from residential neighborhoods. It is illegal, risky, and politically impossible, but it also exposes the failure of the normal system. For the first time, the police are not just chasing the same kids from one corner to another. They are trying to reduce harm, even if the method is desperate. Carver is close enough to see what Amsterdam does. He sees that the neighborhoods get quieter. He sees that people who are being crushed by open-air dealing get some space back. He also sees the human misery concentrated in the zones. Amsterdam is not a paradise. It is ugly. But it is honest about ugliness the city usually spreads out and pretends not to see. For Carver, this matters because it forces him to think past the arrest. A bad cop sees Amsterdam and only asks, who do we lock up? A better cop has to ask, what is actually happening to the neighborhood? What this does for Ellis is make him more thoughtful. He is still not fully formed, but he is no longer just reacting. He is watching. He is learning that police work has consequences beyond the immediate arrest. What this does for the audience is make us take him more seriously. The show is slowly moving him out of comic relief and into moral development. He is not suddenly wise, but he is paying attention. Colvin's downfall also teaches Carver something. Amsterdam cannot survive because the institution cannot admit what it reveals. The department, the mayor's office, and the political machine all need the appearance of control. They can tolerate failure as long as the failure produces the right statistics. They cannot tolerate an illegal success that embarrasses everyone above it. Carver sees that too. He sees a commander try something real and get punished for it. He sees that the department is not designed to reward truth. It is designed to protect itself. What this does for Ellis is deep in the lesson Daniels started. Daniels showed him that personal integrity matters. Colvin shows him that integrity can cost you. Doing the right thing does not mean the institution will thank you. What this does for the audience is place Carver inside one of the show's central questions. Can a person become better inside a system that keeps rewarding the wrong things? With Carver, the answer is not easy, but it is not hopeless. Season 4 is where Carver becomes one of the most important police characters in the show. Not because he solves the biggest case, Not because he wins some grand victory, he becomes important because he finally tries to be responsible for people. By season 4, Carver is working as a sergeant in the Western District, and he is noticeably different. He is still recognizable as Carver. The show does not turn him into a saint, but he is more patient, more aware, and more connected to the street. He talks to people differently. He understands the young boys around the corners with more sympathy than he would have had in season 1. The kids in season 4, Namond, Randy, Michael, and Dookie, are central to showing Carver's growth. They are not just background kids running around the neighborhood. They are the next generation being sorted by the city. The school system fails them, the police system misunderstands them, the street system recruits them, and the family system often leaves them exposed. Carver's relationship to these kids shows how far he has come. Earlier, Carver would have mostly seen them as future arrests. Season 4, Carver sees children standing at the edge of damage. What this does for Ellis is prove that Colvin's lessons took root. He has started to see people before he sees charges. What this does for the audience is change our emotional relationship to him. We stop watching Carver as a screw-up who might improve one day. We start watching him as someone who is trying. And in The Wire, trying honestly is rare enough to matter. Namond is one of the first examples. Namond is not built for the street in the way his father Weebay was. He performs toughness, but the performance is thin. He is loud, theatrical, and often cruel, but underneath that he is scared and unprepared. Carver can see some of that, so can Colvin. Namond's story becomes a test of whether a child can be pulled out before the street hardens him permanently. Carver does not save Namond by himself, but he is part of the chain that makes rescue possible. The fact that Carver has learned enough to recognize the difference between a hardened corner boy and a child pretending to be one matters. In season 1, he may not have noticed. In season 4, he notices. What this does for Ellis is show that he has gained judgment. Not perfect judgment, but better judgment. He can tell that not every kid on a corner is the same story. What this does for the audience is make Carver feel more human. He is no longer just representing the police side of the show. He is becoming one of the people who can see the tragedy while it is still preventable. Randy Wagstaff is the center of Carver's most painful failure. Randy is a kid with charm, intelligence, and a need to survive. He is not innocent in the simple sense. He hustles candy, lies when he needs to, and tries to maneuver around trouble. But he is still a child. He is still someone who can be protected or destroyed depending on what adults do next. When Randy gets pulled into the fallout from the Lex murder, the system starts closing around him. He talks to police. Word gets out that he is a snitch. His foster mother, Miss Anna, gets hurt when their house is firebombed. Randy loses the closest thing he has to a stable home. And Carver, who gave him assurances and wanted to help him, realizes that wanting to protect a kid and actually being able to protect him are not the same thing. This is the most devastating part of Carver's story. He tries. He really tries. He visits Randy. He makes calls. He looks for a better placement. He wants to keep him safe. But the child welfare system is overloaded, indifferent, and cruel by exhaustion. Randy ends up in a group home, and when Carver sees him later, the boy is changed. The open face is gone. The sweetness is buried. Randy has learned what the world does to boys who trust adults. What this does for Ellis is break him in the right way. He has failed people before, but this failure lands differently because he understands it now. Early Carver might have shrugged and moved on. Season 4 Carver cannot hide from what happened. His breakdown after failing Randy is not weakness. It is the proof that he finally understands the weight of the job. What this does for the audience is complete our shift in how we see him. We may not forget who Carver was, but we can no longer dismiss him. His pain is earned because his effort is real. The tragedy is that becoming better does not give him enough power to save the child. That is one of the cruelest lessons The Wire gives through Carver. Personal growth matters, but it does not automatically defeat institutional failure. Carver becomes a better cop, and Randy is still destroyed. That is not the show saying Carver's growth means nothing. It is saying growth is necessary, but not sufficient. One improved person cannot repair every broken office, every lazy supervisor, every overloaded caseworker, and every street rule that punishes weakness. Michael's story also reflects Carver's limits. Michael is sharper and more guarded than Namond or Randy. He does not trust adults, and the show gradually reveals why. His home life is unsafe. His mother is unreliable. His stepfather's return creates a threat Michael knows he cannot safely explain through normal channels. When the institutions around him offer weak or dangerous help, Michael turns to Chris and Snoop. Carver is not the main adult in Michael's story, but his presence in Season 4 helps show the difference between seeing a child and being able to reach him. Michael does not need a lecture. He needs protection that feels real. The state cannot give him that. The school cannot give him that. The police cannot give him that in time. Marlowe's people can, but their protection has a price. What this does for Ellis is show the boundary of his improvement. He can care more, he can understand more. But some kids have already learned not to trust the kind of help he represents. What this does for the audience is make Carver's growth feel more tragic and more credible. The show does not reward him with easy saves. It lets him become better while forcing us to see how late that better version arrives. Dookie's story, while less directly tied to Carver than Randy's, also belongs to the world. Carver is now learning to see. Dookie is the child most obviously abandoned by every structure around him. He is poor in a way that is visible before he says a word. He is gentle, embarrassed, and already marked as someone the world will not protect. The police cannot arrest their way into helping Dookie. The department does not even have a language for a kid like him. Carver's Season 4 arc sits beside Dookie's decline as another reminder that the city's problems do not fit inside police statistics. A robbery can be counted. A body can be counted. A corner can be cleared. But a child slowly falling out of the world is harder to put in a report. What this does for Ellis is widen the meaning of police work around him. He is learning that a neighborhood is not just crime. It is poverty, family collapse, fear, school failure, and children looking for somewhere to belong. What this does for the audience is make us judge him by a higher standard. Once Carver sees the full picture, he cannot go back to being only a numbers cop. And once we see him see it, we expect more from him. By the end of Season 4, Carver has become one of the show's clearest arguments against cynicism. The Wire is often described as a show about systems crushing people, and that is true, but Carver proves the show does not believe all people are frozen. He changes because other people took the time to correct him. Daniels corrected his ethics. Colvin corrected his understanding of the street. The children corrected his sense of responsibility. Randy, especially, becomes the wound that teaches him what leadership actually costs. The important thing is that Carver does not become better through one speech. He becomes better through repeated contact with consequences. He steals money and gets caught. He sells out the detail and feels shame. He watches Colvin try something real and get punished. He tries to protect Randy and fails. Each event removes one layer of ignorance. What this does for Ellis is turn him from a product of the system into someone struggling against the habits the system gave him. What this does for the audience is make his arc feel earned. We believe the change because we watched the damage that created it. Season 5 gives Carver one of his final tests through Officer Colicchio. Colicchio represents the kind of cop Carver used to be closer to: angry, aggressive, entitled, and convinced that being police means never having to answer for how you treat people. When Colicchio crosses the line, Carver does something that Season 1 Carver probably would not have done. He holds him accountable. This matters because it shows that Carver's growth has moved from feeling to action. It is one thing to cry in the car after failing Randy. It is another thing to discipline a fellow officer when the culture around you expects protection. The old code says you cover your own. The better code says the badge is not a license to abuse people. Colicchio's anger at Carver is important because it reveals what Carver has become. To a bad cop, accountability feels like betrayal. Colicchio sees Carver as someone who has forgotten where he came from. But the truth is the opposite. Carver remembers exactly where he came from, and he is trying not to stay there. What this does for Ellis is prove that his growth has become principle. He is no longer just ashamed of being wrong. He is willing to act differently when it costs him socially. What this does for the audience is give us one of the clearest signs that Carver has crossed a line internally. He is not Herc anymore. He is not Colicchio. He is not the sergeant who got promoted for feeding information upward. He is becoming the kind of supervisor Daniels once tried to make him into. Carver's contrast with Herc is one of the most important parts of his story. At the beginning, they seem like two versions of the same man. They are both crude, physical, and immature. But over time, the show separates them. Herc does not really learn. He fails upward, fails sideways, and eventually lands in a private world where his police habits serve lawyers and criminals more than citizens. He is not incapable of affection or loyalty, but he never develops the moral imagination Carver develops. Carver, by contrast, is changed by shame. That is the difference. Herc makes mistakes and mostly looks for someone else to blame. Carver makes mistakes and eventually lets them teach him. Herc remains a man of instinct. Carver becomes a man with memory. What this does for Ellis is define him through comparison. His growth is more visible because Herc stays largely the same. What this does for the audience is make us realize that Carver's improvement was never guaranteed. He could have become Herc. He almost did. The fact that he does not is one of the few quiet victories The Wire allows. The tragedy is that Carver's victory is small compared to the city's failure. He becomes better, but Baltimore does not. He learns, but the department still chases stats. He cares, but children still fall through the cracks. He disciplines bad police, but bad police culture does not disappear. He rises, but the machine remains. That is why Carver's story is so effective. The Wire does not turn him into a hero who fixes the system. It turns him into a better man inside a system that still resists better men. His story is hopeful only in a limited way. It says people can change. It does not say change is enough. By the end of the show, Ellis Carver stands as one of the most complete examples of growth in The Wire. He starts as a street cop who thinks force is the job. He becomes a supervisor who understands that force without judgment is failure. He starts by stealing money and selling out his unit. He ends by trying to protect children and hold his own officers accountable. The movement is not clean and it is not sentimental. It is slow, embarrassing, painful, and incomplete. That is exactly why it works. Carver's story is the story of a man learning too late, but still learning. The Wire respects that more than it respects easy goodness. A person who was always decent is one thing. A person who was careless, corruptible, arrogant, and still found a way to become responsible is something else. Carver earns the audience's respect because the show makes us remember why we did not respect him at first. He is not redeemed by one good act. He is changed by accumulation. Daniels' disappointment stays with him. Colvin's lessons stay with him. Randy's face stays with him. The old Carver does not vanish. It becomes the thing he has to keep refusing. That is why Ellis Carver matters. He shows that The Wire, for all its bleakness, does not believe people are only what their institutions make them. Institutions shape people, reward them, pressure them, and often ruin them. But sometimes, through the right mentor, the right shame, and the right failure, a person can become more than what the system trained him to be. Carver does not save Baltimore. He does not save Randy. He does not save every kid on the corner. But he saves something in himself. And in The Wire, that is not a small thing. It is one of the few wins the show lets us keep.